Hello everyone and welcome to a rating new episode of the StudioMEcast. I am your host, Peter, here at StudioME and StudioME Speakeasy. If you like the look and sound of this podcast, well, you can book this space yourself for your first or next episode. You can do that in the link in the description below at StudioME.me. But today, I am joined, as always, by a very special guest. This is filmmaker Aeyron Moore. He and I go back a little bit because we worked together on a project that I think I've talked about once or twice on this show, and I'm representing with this shirt, which is that wonderful commercial that was done for the Carnegie Science Center of Pittsburgh. Aeyron Moore appeared in that as the titular main character of the unnamed Viking, and for this also, as you can see on his shirt, he is representing his brand, Stone Phoenix. He is the owner of this wonderful production company. They do all kinds of stuff, music videos, and working on some feature films and all that. And we're going to get into all the kinds of things that Aeyron is up to these days. But for now, I'm just going to say, Aeyron, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the place is amazing.
Isn't it? I love being here. It's great. I was very happy to see your beard today.
Oh, yes.
It's gone very well since the commercial that we did together. That was the first time you and I met. Mm-hmm. I was working on that, which I love watching. You've worked on you do music videos, you're working on features right now. You're a generalist in a lot of ways. What's your favorite thing to do that involves media production?
In all honesty, recently, the music videos have actually been fun, and I've kind of written them off because, I think when we were younger, and it's weird to kind of date ourselves that way, but at least myself, MTV and, VH1, you'd always sit there and you'd check out, a new band that comes out. You're just like, oh, there's a song on FYE, I got to go get it. And I feel like there was a point where we just kind of didn't see them much. And now it's, we have a lot of friends. I feel like it's easier today to make your own content, whether it's, you're writing a book, you're making a movie, or you're producing your own album. And there's been like this resurgence of people just wanting to really get into making creative music videos. And it's been fun because there's like no rhyme or reason or rules to it. You just go out, come up with a story, or just come up with cool visuals. And it's just kind of like a playground. So that's been fun recently. But other than that, I would say definitely I do a lot of creative commercial work for different companies and clients. But as always, the one love, the one that got me into it's just making films, making short stories, making features. I mean, whatever it may be, if it's a story, hey, let's go tell it.
Absolutely. And one of the things I love about music videos, too, is it gives you an opportunity to just kind of play with a motif. If you have just an idea for, maybe it's a visual effects technique,
right?
Or there's just a cool location. And sometimes, you want to make a whole feature-length story to use that thing in, but music videos give you an opportunity to focus and play with, like, an idea or a look, because the song is there. It's like that's, right. People are there for the performer or the music, and so it gives, I've found, more of a chance to, like, experiment, really,
right.
with it, outside of what's just strictly cinema, I guess,
right.
But one of the things I really like about your music videos, because I watched all the ones you sent me, is awesome. I love that your work has energy to it, especially, there's the first one you sent me for the metal song.
Oh, Magnetron, yeah.
Magnetron, yeah, and it's got, like, the filmmaking is matching the music really well, and it's like you've got all this glitch effect stuff or the face that's changing and the microwave, all that stuff. It's great to see, like, sometimes when I'm watching a movie or a show, occasionally something that can bother me is if there's a moment that it just feels like everyone was tired while it was happening, right. And the scene doesn't call for it, Right. But your work across the board, I saw, like, whether it's that or you're working with other different music genres and stuff, the energy that you have for it, like the effect it has, is, there's a wide dynamic to it. It's not all the same thing every time or anything like that. But I really liked the intentional diversity of tone throughout your work, which is not easy to do because plenty of people get into one thing and they're like, I make this type of thing, and they stick with that. But it's great to see, like, when you go through anyone's work and just see, like, all these different things, it was really cool for me to see all that. Is that something that, like, I mean, I guess, is there a type of genre or tone that you prefer working in, or do you like changing it up? What's your approach?
I mean, I really do enjoy changing it up. I think when I'm left kind of to my own devices, I definitely like anything fiction, because I just feel like you can exaggerate life and get into just really playing with your imagination. But really, when I'm approached to do a project, I kind of have to remove myself from it and say, what does this want to be? And what, like, kind of like what you said, what's the energy of it? What's the tone of it? And then we really just, as a team, take our skills and try to do justice by it. Like in the case of Magnetron, it was a good friend of mine, Scott. He has a new kind of music entity that he's creating. And when he called me up, it was last minute. And he was like, hey, I got this song. And I was checking it out and thinking, wow, this is pretty intense. And he was like, yeah, it's just about, I don't know, like microwaving weird aliens and things. I went, all right. So when we were shooting it, we just went into like a dark room. And I was like, well, we got these angle grinders, and there's some rusted metal over there. So we just started shooting sparks and just strobing everything. And I was like, this feels right. So it's, I don't know. I think when we approach a project, it's definitely kind of look at the story, look at the source material, and say, what does it need to be? What does it want to be? And then we just try to take our skills and make it come to light.
Absolutely. There was with those angle grinders that, like, with the sparks coming out, I saw, like, there's a lot of visual effects in your work, but that was something that I'm not one person. I'm not one of those people who is like, oh, well, everything is better if it's practical. It's like, sometimes I like meshing them myself, but I did like, when I was watching that, at first I was like, oh, I wonder if that's visual effects, like, just putting in the sparks or whatever. But then there were other shots where it's like you're getting behind the guy, and I was like, I don't think they rotoed that. And I'm like, oh, snap, this is, oh, okay, cool. You're actually doing this. So I don't know, it was a cool thing to see that. Because you have, across your work also, there's a lot of different elements going on. It's not just camera and actors. It's not just visual effects. It's like you deal with practical stuff, but you do have a lot of visual effects, even in just like little moments where putting someone's reflection in something, And it's not like me being able to pick that stuff out isn't like there's anything wrong with the visual effects, by the way. I'm like, okay, there's no way to have a camera there. Right. I do it enough, I can see it. But when it comes to working with visual effects, normally on a project, do you have all your shots planned out in advance, including the visual effects shots, or do you sort of find it as you go?
I would say my visual effects journey has really been kind of mirroring and getting advice from others who really focus on that as their career. So I feel like every project that we try something new, we're always trying to say, hey, what's the best course of action to go for it? And a lot of times we will plan out how we're going to shoot something. But there's being a creative, you're in the moment, you see something, you're like, oh man, it'd be really cool to pull this off. So anytime that we run into more of an improvisational situation where you're thinking, okay, we're in the moment, this might be really cool, I'm always making phone calls saying, hey, I want to try to plan out this kind of shot. What do you think I should do? So it's something that we've been feeling out, but having a plan, the more you do it, you realize there's so much that can slip through the cracks if you're not really thinking that out. Which you watched our one project, Captain Happy Son. That was just an excuse to be like, we have a giant green screen. Let's do stuff with it.
I could tell.
And then you just mess up every single time you spin around.
Oh man.
It's but I think that's part of what makes the journey fun, is kind of finding those things out.
Captain Happy Son, I was very excited to find out that you wrote and directed this, because I had heard about the film for a while. Like, I think I was at the Indie Oaks Theater for some film festival, and it might have been the Oaks Film Festival. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Point is, the trailer for it came up, and I was like, well, I would love to check that out, you know. And over the like past few years, I think it's been, it's come up a couple times in conversation, and I was like, I don't know like where to watch this or anything, you know. It's on Tubi, everybody. So
I'm sorry.
But you mentioned on the way here that there's a lot of caffeine and alcohol went into making the project. I'm about, and I haven't finished it yet. I just got it, but it's like I'm like quarter to a third of the way through, and already I'm like, this is a lot of work. There's a lot of work in this thing. Like even just the sequence where like the guy's, spoiler alerts ish, people, is when the main character is going through the solar system.
Oh, yeah.
You have all the planets with the faces and stuff. I'm like, that looks like that took a little while. So how long did it take you to make that film?
Honestly, so we literally were just approaching graduating film school. This is like back in 2010. And the director of the program was like, hey, if you want to make a feature, go for it. So we all got together and was just like, what do we want to do? And when we couldn't think of anything, we just came up with, like, every one of us just put a little piece of ourselves in it because we love making, like, characters in comic book worlds. But I would say it took 2 years on and off to shoot because it was definitely like a, you know, you were doing this on whatever spare dollars you had, you know, at the end of the month. So we would just kind of get together and just, and a lot of the expense is just making costumes, making like partial sets. And it was just a labor of love. But why it took so long to shoot was because we did so much of it green screen. And we were thinking, oh, this is going to be easy. And then as soon as we got into post, you just realized everything you did wrong. So we were like, let's try it again. I think we shot the movie 3 times because of how bad we were at just understanding. You're like, oh, green wall. I always tell people now, I'm like, green does not mean easy. Green means much harder. You know, but I would say around like 2 years on and off, like a weekend here or there to shoot it. And then post-production is like the bane of our existence with that. I'd say we started the movie really getting into it like 2012, and then I had it done in 2015. We just sat on it forever and then never really thought to do anything with it. And then one day we were all sitting around and we decided to watch it, and we were like, why don't we put it out? So we found Film Hub and we threw it on Film Hub, and none of us, we're all good at making stuff, but we don't know what to do with it once it's done. You know, so I was like, toss it on there.
Critical thing that all filmmakers like eventually. Oh wait, maybe we should look into that.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of an important process, right?
Right. Wow, that's really cool. Like so, about
3.5 to 4 years,
and then eventually you released it after.
Yeah,
like you didn't even make it to release it, which is hilarious to me.
No,
That's great.
It was like the more and more we watched it, because as soon as you get to the end, I was just like, do I want my parents watching this? Do I want people to know this is out there?
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. Have you ever made, well, on that sort of note, have you ever made anything that you regret making?
I wouldn't say anything that I regret, but there's definitely things I'm like, maybe this is just best kept between friends.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
That's good. I want to talk a little bit more about the visual effects in that film first, which is because you do mix a lot of practical stuff with the visual effects as well, whether it's like making certain masks or puppets or something that are all through there. Were the visual effects a group effort as well, or was there like what was the, I guess, the real question is, what was the post-production workflow like on that? Can you go a little bit more in depth?
Oh, yeah. So a good friend and mentor of mine, Dorian Clevenger, he's actually a world-renowned fantasy artist, fantastic, and he got into visual effects. So when we were doing Happy Son, I felt so bad because I would just literally go to Dorian constantly and be like, hey, how do we fix this? You know, and it was great because, you know, we really kind of explored how to do some stuff. I mean, Dorian really took the brunt of everything. there was just times where, I mean, he was teaching me as we went along, so I helped out wherever I could, but post-production would pretty much involve this. I'd edit a green screen scene. We'd be all excited. It's fun. We'd take it to the door, and he was like, what have you done? This is wrong. So I was like, oh, okay, great. So we'd go back to the drawing board, and we'd fix some stuff, but that's kind of how we worked through that process. And then really he put his mark on the whole thing, and, we were making a joke that the first scenes that we actually started attacking, we were so happy that we got them to work. But as we got to the end of the movie, it got way better. Mm-hmm. So we had to go back and clean that part up. So
I've experienced that myself. I'm working on my first feature right now, and one of the things that I kind of figured out early on is that that's going to happen. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get better at making this before I'm done with it. I'm going to want to go back. So what I tried to do, and it's worked some of the time, is I said, all right, let's focus on style, because that can be timeless, I guess. And so I was like, all right, well, I'll just try to make stuff that looks cool. If I'm not capable of technically high quality visual effects at the time, and some of it worked out. Some of it I've gone back and fixed, but I'm still working on it. But that's fun that to hear how you went through all this, because so far it's a madcap movie, man. Like it's got so much going on in it.
Oh yeah, it's like, and I think that was the other thing too, is like when we first started shooting it, we were shooting on Sony Z7Us, and the sensors in those are just like, compared to what we have now, technology now is just awesome, but back then it was like, you're gonna key out the whole movie on green screen on that, okay, so you're just sitting there, and and then you start learning that not all keying engines are created equal, but it was definitely a fun journey. And now, like, kind of to piggyback off something you said earlier, like I'm in the camp where if you can physically put it there, great. Do that first.
First feature film, is that right?
It was definitely the first one that we actually, and wow, this is going to sound horrible, that we took more serious. Mm-hmm. And I guess in the way of it, we were like, we're going to finish it.
Okay. You keep saying we. Who's we?
So, I mean, we all have like an origin story, like where we got started. And, the friends that I had kind of growing up, getting out of high school, filming was our passion. I tried to turn it into more of a career, but, we'd get together on the weekends, we'd film out, in the woods, on the bike trails and stuff like that. And we would, get together and kind of do some films. And some of us, we still work together now, but it's like we're a little collective. You find some fun groups to work in, and you kind of keep them close. I guess that's the we part. Mm-hmm. Like another great guy is Steven Dixon. I work a lot with him. I mentioned Dorian Clevenger. The group's not crazy big, but there's another good friend of mine. His name, he goes by Benzie. He has an effects company up north, like in Allison Park, and like even whenever we did Magnetron, I brought over a old computer and was like, Benzie, can you blow this up? And he started rigging it with sparks, and we were getting steel wool and we're lighting it on fire, and I feel bad because I just show up with a trunk full of crap, like, can we make something happen here? And great. Benzie's usually the guy I call, so
it's like MacGyver.
Oh he is a MacGyver. We did a short film because I actually teach at Douglas Education Center, so I teach at the Georgia Mara Film School, and we have this project. It's called Final Product, where I take the graduates and we go make a film. And we were doing one. It's like it's a witch story. It's coming out soon, I swear. Like, it's been in post forever. Mm-hmm. But we had to do this really cool effect where the characters in our story, it would like they have like an issue where they kind of like wither away, and it's like cracked porcelain. And I was talking to some effects people, and we kept getting these really, really large processes to pull this effect off. So when I go to Benzie, I'm telling him about it, and he walks into his kitchen. He grabs a bag of flour, a hair dryer, and like a little brush with a cup of water, and he just starts doing it on his arm. And then he's like moving his arm, and he goes, does that look good? I'm just sitting there going like, what? Like, how did you do that? Just like, he is like Mr. Wizard.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool. It's, working with people like that is always just like the coolest thing possible. I love it. There's switching gears here for a second though. Do you have a favorite movie?
You know what? Yeah, I love all kinds of movies, but if I had to say the one movie that made me say, "Hey, I want to get into this," like this, just whole lifestyle, would be the Never-Ending Story. Like, as a kid watching the original Never-Ending Story, I just kept thinking, wow, that worlds like this can exist, and we could create them.
That's a great movie.
Yeah.
Well, with that in mind, the projects that you like to do the most, do they reflect the films that you enjoy the most?
I would say some of the projects that I have the most fun doing are definitely ones that are more attainable. Because, for instance, when you get into something where you're like world building, there's a lot that goes into it. A lot of budget, a lot of resources. Yeah, I'd say definitely the ones that I write do tread along the same genres that, I grew up loving and wanting to get into. I feel like a filmmaker's bane is the word budget, and more so I would even say doability, because I think it's something we have to be honest with ourselves on. But, when I do approach writing a project or doing a project with, friends or just other professionals, I always feel like we should try to push ourselves to learn. It's not always about, some of those buzzwords, budgets, fundraising, but it's like, what can you do with raw skills, raw materials, things that you have within your disposal? If you're writing within your means, can you still go after the genres that you love and create something that's, enjoyable to watch? But hopefully that answers kind of.
Yeah, pretty much. It's an interesting direction to take it with. We're all raised on films that are like at the end of what filmmakers are able to do, kind of like
Right.
You watch Star Wars or Marvel or whatever is going on. And it's like a lot of people get hooked into filmmaking through fantasy and sci-fi and all these impossible things that we get to see through movies. But that also just happens to be some of the most expensive stuff to make.
Yes.
So when you're like, I want to make a sci-fi epic or something, it's like, yeah, well, that costs usually $100 million to do that.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, how do I get from where I am now to that, and also manage to enjoy myself at the same time a little bit, And part of that, I think, is having as people grow in doing that. It's nice that filmmakers often grow their appreciation of cinema as they go to also appreciate more lower budget stuff as well. Maybe because part of it's because they can identify with it.
Yeah. And I think even piggybacking off of that too, it's like, there's a lot of people out there who are self-taught, and I think that's amazing. It's a great skill to have. I've been fortunate. I've had a lot of folks, who I've been able to resource and learn from, and like one in particular, Robert Tennell. He's been a mentor of mine since I kind of started the journey, and a lot of these guys are from old Hollywood, and it's awesome when you hear them talk about some of the amazing things they did. And it's duct tape and rubber bands. It's always been duct tape and rubber bands. And you get really good at knowing how to use that. And those, in a way, are the movies that we grew up loving. And I think that's a kind of a reassuring thing for a lot of independent filmmakers to remember is you don't have to have the best. You don't have to have the latest and the most advanced. It's whatever you have and the skill that you bring in to utilizing it is really what makes the difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's I think some people say 80% of filmmaking is problem solving.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's a big part of it. When let's talk about your writing for a bit. Do you consider yourself a writer?
Try to.
Yeah.
I definitely try to write. I'm not the greatest, but I do enjoy, storytelling.
Yeah.
I would say better minds than me read my stuff and say, "What are you doing?" And
Well, the reason why I asked that like that, because I do consider you a writer, because you've written your own films and stuff. But there's some people who get into writing their films because they're like they want to make a film, and it's like, well, I don't know any writers, so I guess I'll write it, And so in a weird way, some people don't think of themselves like that, at least at first. I didn't. But yeah, what's your writing process like?
I mean, when I'm approaching a story, I always try to, I feel like the first and most important things is when you're coming up with a story is like, how's it going to start? How's it going to end? And then the journey of how we get from A to B is definitely going to be, a journey, especially when you're writing. But I feel like most people will remember the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes of your film, or at least how it starts and how it ends. So I always try to kind of jump into that. And then as I'm mapping the story out, just for myself, I still am in that weird camp of, when I was learning, I would get note cards, and every bullet point, I would just write them on note cards and just either stick them on a wall or just file them and start organizing things around. And then eventually, so I'm not someone who can just jump right in to, a writing program and start scripting it out. I have to, I'm still a pen and paper guy.
Oh,
so,
me too.
Yeah, so I love jumping in there and just writing down bullet notes. I like writing about the characters, like, who is this character? Like, if I had to imagine who they really are, what music do they listen to? Like, if they go hang out somewhere, where is that? And then I kind of try to flesh these people out so that way, I don't know if you have ran into this, but sometimes whenever you're reading stuff that people have written or, stuff that you're writing yourself preliminarily, some of the voices can sometimes sound the same. So it's really trying to create your characters to where they become very different people.
Yeah.
And when you read them on screen, they feel like different people. So I think that's usually where I start, because that's really what the story is we're following individuals and we're kind of seeing what their actions unfold into.
Absolutely. Yeah, a great example of that would be like if you have a character, like whether one character speaks even just more formally than another one. But there's more to it than that. But yeah, I know what you mean by it sounds like one person having a conversation with themselves when you're reading it the whole time. And it's like, can we punch up the dialogue a bit? I think that's great to hear about the note cards and working by hand as well, because a lot of the time we hear that films start like it starts with you on a blank page and typing like fade in or whatever. It's like a lot of the time that's true, but a lot of the time it starts with a circle of people just bouncing ideas off of each other with a whiteboard.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to make the story happen, whether it's that kind of thing or it's just someone sitting at their typewriter, old-fashioned, listening to some record or something, with a glass of scotch. I don't know. But
that sounds like a great time.
Yeah, that sounds great. I should do that this weekend. Anyway, do you enjoy writing?
I do, yeah. For me, it's the part of writing, I think, that really kind of becomes fun is when you have that fresh idea. It's like you're driving in your car, you're listening to music, or just wherever it strikes you. You're thinking, man, this is a really cool idea. It's a really cool story. And when you start actually getting it from in here to, a medium, especially just like even a notebook, where you start to see it coming to life, it's kind of like what we talked, like, you watch all these old movies and you love these worlds that are created. It's like now you're actually seeing a world being created. So the writing process, I really feel, is where that starts. I mean, all good movies should start where it's written.
Yeah, I think I've been learning, one of the things that I like to learn a lot about film history, and it's, you think about the silent era of film, and I don't know how common this was or not, but a lot of the earliest films didn't have a script, which was odd, including some of the longer ones, like a very controversial film, the original The Birth of a Nation, right? That didn't have a script to it. It was like based on a book or a play or something. I think it was, I forget if it was a play and then was a book or what. It doesn't matter. There was sort of kind of a source material to it. But D.W. Griffith just had this film kind of in his head as he was doing it. And it's like this 3-hour Civil War thing. It's crazy. But the history behind the making of that movie, by the way, is some of the craziest filmmaking stories I've ever heard. It's bananas. But I'll do a whole video about that someday, maybe. We'll see. I'm not endorsing the film, by the way, in case anyone's getting ideas. Anyway, but the all right. So, but yeah, one of the well, with writing, have you thought about writing a book? Have you written a book?
No, I actually haven't thought about writing a book. Sometimes I've kind of approached it, but it's one of those, I guess, aspects where I've never really tried. So it's kind of like where to start. But I could see myself doing it one day. You know, I always feel too. It's like, I don't know if you agree. Just have you ever written or come up with a story that you're thinking, I might never shoot this, just because of, like, again, it's like you end up creating Star Wars and you're like, how am I going to do that on my end? So then you just sit there and think, well, it's a great story. Maybe I should put it in another medium.
That's exactly what happened. Yeah.
Okay.
So here's my thing. I've convinced like 5 people to write books. All right. And most of them have done some filmmaking, because here's my pitch to you on writing a book. Aeyron, it's so much easier than making a movie. Sorry to everybody out there who's slaved over. I'm not saying it isn't hard. I'm just saying it's like you don't have to even format the script. You write it, and then when you're done writing it, it's finished. Right. You don't have to make it. You don't have to worry about who am I going to get in this, where am I going to shoot it, what am I going to, like, all that stuff completely out the window. You want like 30,000 people to die all at once in a giant explosion, and then they all died, all 30,000. And then here's the other thing. You're a filmmaker, right? You're not a novelist,
right?
You know, like and even if you wrote a novel, you might not think of yourself like you're like, no, I happen to, I wrote a book. All right, so the stakes for you are like down by dinosaur bones. It doesn't even matter if this thing's good or not. All the pressure's off. So if you write this thing, you'll be in 1% of people that have written a book. That's pretty cool. Right. It can be about whatever you want, and if it's not good, no one's even gonna care, because it's not like, oh, this is my craft and thing that I've devoted my entire life to. And here's another convincing thing that can say, like, you might be able to write something that's pretty good. If you like, think of the spectrum of books of like the Great American Novel, whatever that is, and then like, I don't know what book people are dunking on now, but it used to be Twilight, So it's like, you think about the spectrum of that. There's a chance that you could write something that's on that half of it. All right. A lot of people's favorite authors weren't primarily authors when they wrote their stuff. It's like Frank Herbert was an ecologist and a journalist, and he wrote Dune. All right. You've got Tolkien, who was a philologist and like a college professor, and he did his thing.
Right.
You've got Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a doctor. He just happened to write Sherlock Holmes. You've got, like, a lot of people's favorite stuff is by people who just like, oh, I do this other thing. I just happen to write. It's dirt cheap to write these things. Okay. It's like, so it's and then when you write it, it's done. You don't have to think like, great, now I have to make it. It's like, no, you don't even have to publish the thing if you don't want to, but you still wrote a book. So that's my pitch to you. You should write a book someday.
I think you've sold me, because I can think of a few stories right now. I'm like, you know what? It probably would make more sense to turn that into a book than try to make it.
Absolutely. And best case scenario, like, you know how much of a long shot this would be, but let's say that book takes off, ends up being amazing, and people love it, and then that's your ticket to adapt your own book. Right. I think that's only happened like once or twice with people. But, it could happen. Worst case scenario, you have a book,
Right.
And you did that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Which, hey, you know what? That's a best case scenario for some, so I'll take it.
Yeah, so definitely you should. Like, it's, and it's, and once you get into it, hey, think of it that way. Everyone that I've convinced to do it has been like, this is a lot of fun, It's like, right. So anyway, so definitely write a book. Now, aside from writing, you're often operating the camera yourself.
Yes.
Okay. You're also directing. Sometimes you're directing while you're operating the camera.
Yes.
All right. That's pretty difficult.
Very. Yes, it's very. I mean, doing it as like, I would say for the past 10 years I've been doing this as my primary source of income. So it's been my job, and a lot of times when you're getting into certain projects, whether that be commercial or even a film, there's budgetary restraints. We can only hire so many people, so people get pretty good wearing multiple hats. And yeah, sometimes I am directing something and shooting something, and it's definitely not the funnest. But, I think the challenge definitely kind of makes you start to appreciate all the different positions and all the different roles and how they work together.
So do you prefer collaborating with a director or a director of photography?
Anytime that, yeah, I'm able to, I would love to, yeah. I mean, so working with a director, because it's like you essentially can devote your mind and your skills to one important aspect while somebody else has the other. Mm-hmm. I always feel like the less that the less hats you have to wear, you're going to do a more successful job at what it is you're focusing on. So, like, I always make a joke because some of the folks that I always work with, I mean, Dixon, if you're out there, he's probably gritting his teeth right now because he knows I do this. Anytime we're on a project where I'm directing and shooting, I will oftentimes have, big heavy camera rig, it's all rigged up, and there's a switch in my head where it goes, I got to direct, oh, hey, I got to shoot it. And I will just completely walk away from the camera. It's just unattended to go talk and direct, and he's always over there just grabbing the camera, and that's something that we run into a lot. And so it's like any time that you're able to really, and I always tell people, it's like, look, even though you know how to do a lot of things or even everything, you shouldn't do everything. Always work with a lot of skilled folks who can assist and bear the brunt of the workload.
Do you prefer directing or shooting?
I love directing. Mm-hmm. I've always loved the storytelling aspect of it. Shooting was one of those things I got into because it was like what you said with writing. I was like, well, we don't always have someone who knows how to shoot, so I might as well learn how to do it. Mm-hmm. And, over the years I've become kind of a tech nerd. Like, I love technology. I love what's coming out. So I just kept, getting this piece of equipment, getting that piece of equipment. And now I do it primarily as a job. And I would say, too, I mainly get hired to shoot. Directing is something that usually gets tacked on because, a producer's like, you could do it. So I'm like, oh, okay, but it does make the job way more stressful. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure you've probably been in similar situations where you're wearing multiple hats, and it's just...
Yeah, it's not my favorite. I mean, my favorite thing to do is direct, absolutely. And one of my favorite parts of that is working with the actors. And, sometimes it depends on the project. There might be a project where I'm enjoying working with the visual effects artists or animators more than than what the experience with the actors was. It's, whatever. But in general, like, I just love directing. I love working with actors. I love breaking down a script. I love collaborating with a director of photography and department heads. I love working with artists who are good at what they do and industrious and are able to bring their own collaborative takes to the characters or the wardrobe or all of it. And being, like, ideally on a film set or any film, ideally I'm kind of not doing anything physically. It's like I'm not too good to carry a box or anything like that, but like if everybody's got their defined role and everybody knows what everybody's job is, which is an enormous luxury if that happens, because like you said, it's like so much of the time people are wearing multiple hats. I like being involved with the writing process, but I don't think I necessarily need that all the time. I'd love to find a great writer who, like, wrote a screenplay that I read and was just like, this, I feel like I'm the right person for this, I do love writing, but I love directing a lot more. So, but absolutely. Is there a part of directing that you like the most?
I mean, for me, it's, I think the part of directing that I feel the most connected to is I never feel like I inherently make anything happen. I feel like I'm just telling a story. But when I'm working with talent and you assist them on just not repeating words that's on a screen, you actually help them get to a place where they more so feel like they're a part of this world and that they're becoming a new person. And then all you're doing at a certain point is just little nudges, almost like a subconscious, where you can kind of help drive and guide and watch this story kind of come to life. To me, that's a really exciting part. I also love the technical side where we're designing shots and we're really coming up with ways to enhance their performances so a viewer is going to be more immersed into that world. To me, I think that's the part that's really amazing, is just the world creation. Even if it's just people sitting at a coffee shop talking about something intimate between two characters, just creating that vibe to where we feel like a fly on the wall watching that happen is, I think, the part that's kind of magical to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when as someone on set, it's like live theater, almost like
Yes.
yeah, like you're seeing it for real.
Oh
Like,
yeah, yeah.
What a rush, man. Yeah.
It's like I was in theaters since I was 4 years old. My mom was just like, yeah, let's go do it. And when I kind of crossed over into the film world, it was mainly because it's like, wow, we have more than a stage. Like, we really can make this stuff more believable. And I feel like a lot of those same principles between stage and film kind of translate. Except for if you mess up on film, we just do it again. In theater's a little bit of a different story.
Right. They have to work their way out of it as they go.
Yeah, it's a lot harder.
I did like the school musicals in high school, which is a lot of fun. And we did Annie, and I was Daddy Warbucks, and I shaved my head for it. And I don't think we actually did the whole show like as a full dress rehearsal in one go before we did the show. So I think the first time we did the whole musical was opening night for it. And there were a couple little moments that we realized, oh, we don't have this prop. Like, it was like there's a scene where in the musical they get a telegram, and Drake, the butler, comes in, telegram for you, sir, and I look at it and I pass it to Annie, and she's like, gee willikers, or whatever, and I'm going to show it to the president, and FDR's there, and she goes over, and we didn't have the telegram prop. And I realized that, like, the door opens, and the guy, Zach, who's playing Drake, just is looking at me and communicating, like, I can't hand you anything. Like, we both, we don't have this thing. And so he's like, that, and I'm like, got it, and holding it like, Annie, look at this, and I think the entire audience knew exactly what was going on. And so I'm like, show it to the president, and stuff. Now, for me, I like to say I love every process, every part of the filmmaking process, even the stuff that I don't like, I'm still like, I'm doing it, I'm making a movie, One of the things I could do without, personally, is rotoscoping, like personally doing. And I was rotoscoping yesterday. I'll probably rotoscope again tonight before I go to bed. Is there a part of the filmmaking process that you could do without?
Oh, I think you and I are in the same camp. Rotoscoping sucks. It's, it's important. And there's people out there who are fantastic at doing it. And I'm like, you know what? Buy them a pizza because they're doing the stuff that nobody wants to do in post. But rotoscoping is definitely the worst.
Yeah, it's and it's like the number one solution to most of my problems as well. And it's not like I dislike it because I have to do it a lot. It's the process.
Right.
It's like,
right.
It's laboriously tedious, and you have to wait for it to. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, by the way, rotoscoping is basically the act of cutting a character or an object, cutting something out of the shot. So if I'm sitting in this chair and we didn't set up a green screen, and also I'm wearing green, and we wanted to change the backdrop to something else, which I'm not doing for this episode. Sorry, everybody. I've got other stuff to use your imagination. It would be me cutting myself out and the mic and chair frame by frame, and hopefully my hair isn't too fuzzy or something, because that's its own issue.
I'd be a lot easier.
Right, yeah. And so, but that's rotoscoping, in case you don't know. And I don't particularly know anybody who really loves doing it.
I want to meet him and I want to buy him a beer.
Right, yeah.
Like, you deserve it.
It's nuts. It takes forever, pretty much all the time. Although, probably in the I think in the past year, Adobe After Effects updated their rotoscope tool to 3.0. It's way better. And part of the reason why is because it has some AI implemented in it to help with processing frames to guess what the next cutout shape is.
Right.
You mentioned you're really into tech and all that.
Yeah.
Everybody in the tech world, and apparently at Davos, that place in Switzerland where all the elites get together and have those eyes wide shut parties under a mountain with goat masks, they're all talking about AI. You know, I think it would be good if we brought that up because we've used AI in the studio spaces. We're expanding stuff and we're being very mindful of it. But have you dabbled with any AI technology?
I mean, we've loosely have worked a little bit with AI, and even just mainly too is just, you know, some commercialized content that we've helped clients with, because a lot of times they want to be able to manage their own websites. And, you know, if they're doing something simple with their cell phones and they're, you know, going to shoot content and they want to keep it current, we've kind of pushed them into the AI can help them edit that for them with some just basic resources. And I know a lot of people are thinking AI is going to take over the world, but I think it has its places. You know, it's
beneath humans.
Right. Like the human factor is always going to be the human factor. But I think AI is going to come in to play a role where it can help facilitate and speed things up, especially for smaller groups, smaller bands. And, you know, I think it's something definitely to be curious about and embrace. Just my opinion. I know some people are like, no, you're all for the machine. I'm like, well, when it becomes Terminator and Skynet's coming after us, maybe I'll go back on that. But, you know, I think AI definitely has a useful place, and I've seen it a lot more on the post-production end.
Yeah, I was actually talking with John Gannan, who was on a previous episode of this show. And we talked about AI in that episode, but we talked about AI yesterday evening. I saw him. And one of the things they talked about was, you know, well, AI in a lot of ways has already surpassed humans. I'm like, sure, but I want AI to stay as a tool.
Yes.
Like technically a knife has surpassed my ability to cut up vegetables with my hand, you know, but it's still a tool. It's when the knife turns to me and says, you know, I don't think you should eat that. It's not very healthy. And the government has decided that, or my algorithm or whatever is like, you shouldn't eat this, so I'm not going to cut up this food for you. That's too far. I don't like it.
Right, yeah. When the spoon starts saying, you know what, you probably shouldn't eat that. It's like, you know what, spoon, stop it.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch to forks.
That's funny. It's like, it's soup. I'll do it anyway. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, now, we talked a little bit about some of your other feature work, but you said you have, before we start recording this, I think this is a wonderful note to sort of like start to close up on. You have some features, plural, in the works right now, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of companies that, or there's a company that I'm working for, and they have a lot of feature films that have been coming into the area, which I think is great because we're now starting to see, you know, a large surge of that type of work coming right into our back door. And there's a lot that are going to be coming in. I don't know how much I can talk about it, but, you know, there's a lot that are coming in, and, you know, a lot of my positions on those are definitely in, like, the camera department.
Nice.
But it'll be pretty exciting. But, you know, other than that, it's just mainly been, you know, I'd say smaller form content that we're getting into, locally at least.
Well, that's all very exciting to hear. I'm glad that you're keeping busy.
Trying to.
Is there, everybody, if you want to see some of Aeyron's projects, we've got links in the description below, including a link to that film on Tubi that we mentioned.
Oh, jeez.
Captain Happy Son. Right? And, we also got his website and a few other things, and his Instagram. He posts some pretty cool stuff there, so make sure you give him a follow. But Aeyron, it's been a pleasure talking with you today. I'd love to have you on again sometime.
Yeah, great.
Awesome.
This was awesome.
Yeah, it's I like doing this.
Yeah.
But thanks again for being my guest.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, thank you again for joining us for another episode of the StudioMEcast. Thank you for your time. You can't have it back. And if you're the kind of person who subscribes, well, you know how to do that. We'd appreciate it. But whether that's the case or not, we hope to see you again because we'll be here. Thank you. Bye-bye. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to start your own podcast, why wait? Reach out to us at StudioME.me, and I hope you hear me again soon.